Добрый день, уважаемые дамы и господа.
Good afternoon, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. Our moderator has started with the issues the world economy is facing. I'm going to talk about that a little bit in my keynote address, but I hope you'll understand me. It will be right if the head of Russia is going to be talking about the issues Russia is facing and how we propose to deal with them. This year, the St. Petersburg Economic Forum has a special significance. It is one of the emblematic events of Russia's presidency in the G20. Incidentally, I propose that the next economic forum should be conducted before the G8 summit, in which Russia is going to be president in 2014. We prioritize taking practical, systemic decisions aimed at resuscitating the global economy and financial system through development, which presupposes the implementation of cutting-edge technologies, financing investment, including in the human capital, and developing the social systems, creating enterprises with a high added value, and thereby creating high-quality jobs. All these are priorities of Russia's presidency and the G20. Those are also our priorities in our internal social and economic policies. Time demands that we act decisively. And this is not a coincidence that it is the motto of the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, because our primary goal is to create in Russia the conditions for dynamic economic growth. For a long time, we've been living in the conditions of the high growth of prices for our primary commodities, which gave the enterprises and the state a chance to cover high costs. This is no longer the case, nor do we have a magic wand which can change the situation in a moment. The situation demands that we observe discipline, that we choose the right balance between long-term goals and addressing urgent, burning issues. The economic growth should be based on three pillars: an increased labor productivity, investment, and innovation. Achieving progress in all these dimensions can only be achieved through decreasing costs, financial costs, administrative and infrastructural costs, through investing in human capital and creating competitive atmosphere for business. Another prerequisite for growth is, as it were, a conducive environment, that is macroeconomic stability, further targeted inflation, disciplined budget, and observing the budgetary rule which we've introduced and which is already in place. I can give some explanations. The budgetary rule implies that excessive money revenues that we have, if the economic situation is favorable, are channeled into reserve funds. I'd like to reiterate the strategic course that we've chosen is not going to be changed, and that is very important. I'd like to point it out. We're going to adhere to that policy, whatever the reshuffles, and the Central Bank of Russia or the economic sections of the presidential administration and the government. By the way, Ms. Nabiulina is this day working for the last day in the government. Now she's going to be the head of the central governor of the Russian bank, and I'd like to thank her for the work she's done on her post. Dear ladies and gentlemen, we've paid a high price and we've adhered to a responsible financial policy. We've managed to target inflation significantly. There were years when inflation rates were higher than 30%. The year before last year, it was at a historic minimum. It stood at 6.1%. Last year, it was 6.6%. Now it's at 7%. It's still acceptable, but we have a long way to go. We are creating, at least we have to create, basic conditions for long-term investment, which are of so high demand in order to change the structure of our economy. I've already told you that the inflation rate is still high, and we're going to target it further. Today, as far as inflation and inflation expectations are concerned, there is a high influence of monetary factors, the so-called tariff component. A very rapid growth of tariffs as an important factor which leads to the spiraling of inflation, impedes economic growth, and leads to higher costs and lower competitiveness. It is evident that tariffs cannot grow at the paces they used to. Therefore, we've taken a decision that the growth of regulated tariffs of infrastructural monopolies shouldn't exceed the real inflation of the preceding year. This is going to be in effect for 5 years, starting from 2014. At the same time, we all understand pretty well that the end price for the electricity consumer or for a supplier is not limited to the tariff component. So I ask the government to come up with such a mechanism which would ensure that the end price for the consumer should stand at an acceptable level and correspond to all the parameters. When taking tariff decisions, we should mandatorily take into account the opinion of consumers, and the procedure should be very strict so that it shouldn't just be lofty words and wishes. Probably consumer councils should be created under the Federal Tariff Service, under infrastructural monopolies and regional energy commissions. And I ask the government, in partnership with the business community, to come up with proposals on that. I'd like to emphasize that our infrastructural monopolies have a potential to decrease their costs. Each company should take a program to decrease costs and raise efficiency. Money should be invested smartly. But constraining tariffs shouldn't lead to negative implications to lower investment and to infrastructure. So our key goal in the coming years is to remove many infrastructural limitations which are stifling our country and which prevent whole regions of Russia from fulfilling their potential. In this respect, I'd like to say that we've been discussing for a long time the employment of our financial reserves. We have some of those. One of them is the reserves of our National Welfare Fund, which should be used for the sake of Russian economy and for coming generations. They shouldn't be spent on trifles. They should be channeled to finance projects which are changing the shape of the country and which open up new prospects for development. Therefore, we've taken a very important decision, that is to invest 550 billion rubles into profitable infrastructural projects and to get a return on them. On the whole, as far as the territory of our country is concerned, we are going to invest up to half of the reserves of the NWF in such projects. The key condition is the assessment of viability and efficiency of those projects by the business community, and those projects should also be core-financed by the business community. But of course, the government should be willing to give guarantees, minimize risks, and act as a co-investor. At least that was evidenced by my yesterday's meeting with the heads of the world's biggest investment institutions. Yesterday I had a meeting with them, and I see some of them here in this hall. Today, I ask you to act as co-investors in implementing the first 3 of such projects, which are going to be financed through the reserves of the National Welfare Fund. First of these projects is the high-speed railroad Moscow-Kazan, which is going to be the pilot part of a railroad which is going to link the central part of Russia, the Volga region, and the Ural region. The second project is the Central Automobile Ring Road, which is, as a matter of fact, going to be rebuilt in the territory of the Moscow region and some parts of New Moscow. Some parts of the highway are going to be built 30 to 70 kilometers from the Moscow Automobile Road. The Central Ring Road is a new project which is going to change entirely the logistics of transportation in the central part of Russia. It is going to link together the central parts of the country. It is going to alleviate the transit burden for Moscow. And it is also going to improve the transport and environmental conditions in the capital of Russia itself. Dear friends, dear colleagues, the Russian participants of this meeting today understand what it means for those who live in the central part of Russia, just in Moscow, in the Moscow region. The population accounts to 20 million people. And if we take into account the adjacent regions, then we'll understand that the number of those who are going to be using those projects is going to stand at a higher rate. And the last project is the modernization of our Trans-Siberian Railroad and expanding its throughput capacity. It's one of the longest railroads in the world at around 10,000 kilometers. It is going to be the artery linking together Europe and the Asian Pacific. We are giving a strong impetus to the development of the Russian Far East and Siberia. Our transport infrastructure is moving closer to the dynamically expanding Asian markets. All these projects are an invitation to work together with us in Russia. I'd like to reiterate, we, for one, are willing to invest money. We're interested in strong, ambitious and reliable partners, and I instruct the government of Russia to, as soon as possible, come up with concrete mechanisms for the implementation of these projects. I'd like to emphasize not just lofty words, but projects carefully thought through and prepared. I'd like to say that the new pipeline infrastructure in the Far East, with a strain towards China and towards sea terminals in the Pacific, will allow us to implement large-scale projects in the Asian Pacific. This infrastructure has already given the Rosneft a chance to sign today a large-scale contract with the Chinese National Oil and Gas Corporation, which implies oil supplies for 25 years, up to 46 million tons per annum. The contract, according to the estimates, is worth $270 billion, which is unprecedented. The media say something about $70 billion, but that's just prepayment. Another project which will give Russia a chance to get to the Asian and Pacific markets is the construction of a railroad bridge over the Amur River, and we've signed an agreement with the Chinese counterparts. The throughput capacity is going to be 5 million tons of cargo annually, and it is going to be expanded up to 20 million tons. Ladies and gentlemen, money of our internal investors should also be a resource basis for investment into development projects. And for that, we need confidence in the financial sector and a commensurate system for regulations. The supervisory functions of the financial institutions are going to be transferred to a super regulator, which is going to be supervise banks, investment and pension funds. And such a super regulator is going to be established on the basis of the central bank. And in the near future, we're going to create a special safeguarding pension saving systems on the basis of the deposit insurance system. This will allow us to remove the bottlenecks that exist now. We should also define the share of pension savings which are going to be channeled as investments into securities of infrastructural projects. I've already told you about those money which are going to be used for the 3 projects, but this is not enough. It's just the starting point. We are going to use other money of the investors, of pension funds. As these projects are being implemented, we are going to seek other sources. We are also going to develop our stock market so that it meets all the world standards. We are taking concrete steps to that end. The Moscow Stock Exchange is already ready for huge listings and privatization transactions. And I'd like to emphasize that we're going to conduct the privatization of state assets on the basis of Russian financial platforms. And the VTB listing testifies to that. The listing was quite successful. Everything was organized just fine. At the same time, the privatization is going to be conducted stage by stage. We're going to benchmark the quality of transactions. At the same time, we're going to raise the transparency and openness of our public companies. Whatever the ownership structure, we're going to create protection mechanisms for minority shareholders and improve the corporate governance. A couple of words about the state-owned enterprises. Very often investors make their judgment on the quality of governance in the country on the basis of the activities of these state-owned enterprises. And very often they make unfavorable conclusions. Therefore, we should increase the regulatory role of the state and these companies. Management of these companies should receive clear parameters, capitalization of companies and return in the capital. And once these indicators have been established, we'll make a decision on rewarding or punishing the management. But of course, regulation or efficiency indicator is not going to supplant competitiveness and competition. Whatever the ownership structure of a company in a normal market economy, there can be no preferences. There should be created a competitive atmosphere in the markets of goods and services at the internal and national level. Just the first step in this field, we propose removing limitations to the LNG export. We have now a window of opportunities for the Asian and Pacific market because we expect the consumption of LNG to double. We're going to liberalize the export of LNG. This will give us a chance to take full advantage of the potential for offshore gas drilling and the coastline. One of our companies, Novatek, has signed an agreement with the Chinese Oil and Gas Corporation to cooperate on Yamal LNG. The Chinese part is going to buy 20% in this company and also strike a long-term deal to export LNG into China. Gazprom is also preparing for signing contracts with Japan and China. We are also going to invest hugely, along with prominent companies and the oil and gas sector, ExxonMobil and Eni, into the offshore drilling, and we're also going to increase local content and production and create cutting-edge technologies together with world technological leaders such as General Electric. Dear ladies and gentlemen, another important factor when deciding whether to invest or not is taxes. Our tax policy should also be working for the development. It should incentivize investment, modernize the existing and create new productions in Russia and create high-quality jobs. So devising our tax policy, we assume that even tough budgetary limitations for the state is not a justification for the increase in tax burden for the business. Over the last year, we've improved our tax administration. Over the last year, Russia has gained 30 points, and now it ranks 64th as far as the quality of tax administration is concerned, and we are now ahead many of the OECD countries. But this is not the end, of course. In the near future, we're going to bring as close together as possible fiscal accounting and bookkeeping. We've been talking about that for a long time, and we're also going to create new investment incentives as far as investing into the authorized capital and Russian companies' securities is concerned. And it also concerns our projects in the Far East. I'd like to add that the titles of our legal entities is already exempt from taxation. Another important factor as engaging citizens to participate in the capital market. We should create tax incentives so that our citizens make long-term investment and so that they could get return on the economic growth. At the same time, we're going to fight the erosion of tax bases and offshoring. We are going to work both at the national and the international levels on that. Yesterday I met the Y20. Young people come up with very tough ways to fight transferring money into offshore zones. I believe we might borrow some of their ideas. Chancellor Merkel also talked with me about that. We talked at the G8 about the offshoring of the world economy. Russia proposes striking deals with offshore jurisdictions and low tax rate jurisdictions on the disclosure of tax information. And these agreements are becoming increasingly numerous now. We are working on that within the framework of the OECD and the FATF. Incidentally, Russia is going to assume the FATF presidency. The Russian State Duma has adopted the relevant law, and it is going to be signed very soon. We are also making amendments to our legislation aimed at fighting money laundering. We are significantly improving the supervision over such actions. Credit organizations are going to establish the identity of their clients and disclose the information on beneficiaries, and if any violations are established, they'll have to stop granting banking services. We're also introducing instruments for tax supervision over such transactions. Information is going to be disclosed on the banking accounts of individuals. We've adopted some amendments to the tax code, and we've also struck on a bilateral basis such deals with our partners from abroad. Another important factor is the accessibility of bank credits. It is especially relevant for the SME, and we've got to take a number of measures in this respect. We've got to improve the mechanisms for refinancing the banking system, improve the competition, and expand instruments such as state guarantees for small and medium enterprise. We should also give the banks an opportunity to decrease their risks, their costs and administrative costs through removing excessive control procedures and accounting procedures. We should pay special attention to protecting the rights of lenders. Very often banks not only cannot return their money if those who they lend money to declares bankruptcy. We should protect their rights. We should also protect the rights of the consumers of financial and insurance services, because many of them are not well versed in the financial field. I'd like to tell you something. Recently, a social movement has been established, the Popular Front for Russia. Probably it should become a platform for creating a mechanism for protecting the rights of those who take credit, and we should ensure that the resources which are channeled on our priorities should be transparent. Dear ladies and gentlemen, our key priority is the improvement of business climate. Everyone, starting from a mayor of a small country to federal minister, from a police officer to the leadership of our law enforcement agency, should work for the sake of that. The quality of state governance is one of the decisive factors in this respect. Therefore, all levels of our leadership should get clear goals, and the outcomes of their work should be assessed according to their personal efficiency And I like to say that our investment image and our internal business climate depends on that. We do not distinguish between us and them, between those who come from abroad and internal actors, because we are interested in those who act decisively, and we will do everything in our power to make Russia a good place to work in, and we'll like to assure you that all the measures that we've promised to improve the Russian business climate is going to be implemented. We've done a lot to depenalize commercial disputes. Together with the business community and the Russian parliament, we've done a lot to humanize our penal legislation in order to establish common approaches to settle disputes between citizens and municipal bodies as well as state bodies. I'd like to propose to unite the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court of Arbitration of Russia. This will require making amendments to the Russian Constitution. That is very important, and we should take it seriously. So I'd like to ask the parliament, the judiciary, and the Russian government to unite their strength. And doing that, probably could do that during the autumn session. The draft law is going to be submitted to the parliament in the near future. Russia has witnessed the establishment of a new institution of business ombudsman. Business ombudsman has certain powers required for defending the interests of the business community and their interactions with the government, and these powers are enshrined in the law. They even have the right to suspend the acts taken by municipal authorities. And very often the associations of citizens are going to have the right to file lawsuits in the interests of a great number of persons. So we have a new institution of civil ombudsman along with the institution of state ombudsman. And there is another principal decision I'd like to tell you about. A month ago, we had a meeting with the leaders of the most prominent business associations of Russia. There was a proposal to declare amnesty on the so-called economic crisis. As you know, the Russian legislation has changed drastically, and many people wouldn't have been convicted had the current norms been in place at that time. But of course, we shouldn't be hasty about the amnesty. We shouldn't allow those who've committed serious offense against the country, the state, the persons, or the property be liberated. I talk about money counterfeiters or raiders. Of course, those who committed crimes involving violence or threat of violence shouldn't be acquitted either. The draft amnesty has been adjusted by the business community and the MPs. I believe I can agree with that. So I would ask the State Duma to consider it and support. I believe it can be done before the State Duma adjourns for the summer. According to this draft amnesty, the amnesty is going to cover those who committed crimes related to entrepreneurial activities, but those who were convicted for the first time and who made up for the damages or were willing to do that. And this is going to be withdrawn from the files of these citizens. The decision on economic amnesty doesn't just restore justice. It's not just an act of humanism. It is a signal to our supervisory bodies. It is a chance for us to reorganize the space for the activities of entrepreneurs. It will give us a chance to increase confidence in entrepreneurial institutions. I'd like to emphasize that we can only achieve success if we respect entrepreneurial activities and law. In conclusion, I'd like to get back to one of the principal issues of human capital. We are implemented a project on saving the nation. We are investing money and developing the human capital. We are paying special attention to the healthcare system and the social welfare system. We are also improving all levels of education, including vocational education. We are going to be faced with demographic challenges in the coming years, but we understand that the social changes in the economy are going to be increasingly important. Therefore, abstract figures on the GDP or the industrial growth, even though they are very important, cannot be our ultimate goal. We should be interested in concrete improvements in the lives of our citizens, and we're working for that. And thank you very much.